Let's get right into it. Some say history is random, unpredictable, and full of surprises. But what if some of its darkest turns were actually seen coming sometimes decades or even centuries before they happened? Today, we're unpacking the creepiest moments in history where predictions actually came true and the stories are stranger than fiction. Number 7. The Prophet of the Flames. Imagine opening a dusty old book and finding a line that seems to foretell disaster. That's what makes Nostradamus such a legendary figure even centuries after he wrote his famous quatrains. Among his most chilling prophecies is the one that many believe predicted the Great Fire of London, which tore through the city in 1666. The passage, written more than 100 years earlier, speaks of the blood of the just and London burnt by fire in the year 66. Now, skeptics love to point out that Nostradamus's prophecies are so vague, you can make them fit just about anything. But there's no denying the weird specificity here. The fire, which started in a bakery on Pudding Lane, destroyed over 13 houses and left much of the city in ruins. What's creepier is how Londoners already rattled by plague and political chaos found themselves combing through Nostradamus's words for comfort or answers, as if he'd reached out from the past to send a warning. Whether you believe in prophecies or not, it's wild how words written in the 16th century can gain new power in the chaos of disaster. So next time you hear a vague prediction, just remember sometimes all it takes is one big event to give an old prophecy new meaning. Number 6. The Titan and the Titanic. Let's time travel to 1898 when a struggling writer named Morgan Robertson published a novella called Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan. The story centers on a giant, luxurious ocean liner called the Titan, famously labeled unsinkable. The Titan is making its maiden voyage when it slams into an iceberg and sinks in the freezing Atlantic, killing nearly everyone aboard due to a lack of lifeboats. Sound familiar? 14 years later, the Titanic, another unsinkable ship, would make its own ill-fated journey. The similarities are genuinely eerie. Both ships were described as around 800 feet long, both collided with icebergs in April, and both lacked enough lifeboats for passengers. It's enough to make you wonder if reality sometimes borrows its scripts from fiction, or if we just love finding patterns when tragedy strikes. Robertson himself shrugged off the connection as coincidence, but his story now sits in the Hall of Fame for uncanny predictions. Next time you read a wild work of fiction, ask yourself, could it be a sneak preview of reality waiting to happen? Number 5. Jules Verne and the Moonshot Blueprint. Before Neil Armstrong set foot on the lunar surface in 1969, before rockets thundered over Cape Canaveral, and even before most people thought the moon was reachable, Jules Verne had already mapped out a journey there in startling detail. Back in 1865, Verne published From the Earth to the Moon, a story that seems ripped from the playbook of the Apollo missions. In his version, an ambitious crew launches a projectile rocket from Florida, aimed straight at the moon. But the coincidences don't stop at the location. Verne's space cannon is fired from Tampa, astonishingly close to Cape Canaveral's real coordinates. He even predicts the size and material of the capsule, the use of aluminum, and the idea of splashdown recovery in the ocean. His rocket, carrying 3 passengers, blasts off, completes its lunar loop, and ends up splashing into the sea just as Apollo 11 would more than a century later. What makes this story stand out isn't just Verne's imaginative reach. It's the sheer precision of his vision, a vision rooted in scientific research and wild creativity. Verne read obsessively about ballistics and physics, and his gift was connecting dots that others couldn't see. He imagined a future where technology and courage would fuse, bringing humans to places they'd only seen through a telescope. This wasn't just a lucky guess. It was a writer's blueprint that made future scientists and astronauts dream bigger. When the Apollo astronauts paid tribute to Verne, they weren't just being polite, they were tipping their helmets to the power of imagination as a driver of progress. Verne proved that sometimes you have to see the future before you can build it. If you ever have an out there idea that seems impossible, remember, you might just be sketching the first blueprint of tomorrow. Number 4. Lincoln's Shadowy Dream. Abraham Lincoln was known for his gravitas and somber humor, but even those close to him were rattled when he shared a chilling premonition. In the spring of 1865, just days before his assassination, Lincoln told his closest friends and his wife about a dream that shook him to the core. He described walking into the East Room of the White House, only to find a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments, surrounded by weeping mourners and guarded by soldiers. When he asked who had died, a soldier replied, "The president." He was killed by an assassin. Lincoln awoke from the dream unsettled, and those around him never forgot his words. On April 14, Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth, dying the following morning. The president's body did, in fact, lie in state in the East Room, just as the dream had described. Skeptics argue that memories grow fuzzy and stories get embellished, especially in the haze of grief. But whether you think it was genuine foresight or just the anxious workings of a stressed mind, it's a powerful reminder. Sometimes our deepest fears can take on a life of their own. Trust your instincts when they whisper sometimes they know more than you think. Number 3. The Rise of Hister. Picture this. The year is 1835, and French author Jean-Marie Alphonse Carr pens a satirical story poking fun at politicians with a villain named Hister. Now, fast forward to the 16th century and you'll find Nostradamus' prophecies referencing Hister, a name suspiciously similar to a man who would haunt the 20th century, Adolf Hitler. But this isn't just a case of random syllables overlapping. In Nostradamus' quatrains, Hister is associated with floods, tyranny, and devastation spreading across Europe. The Rhine River is mentioned, and battles rage in the region that, centuries later, would be Hitler's home turf. Conspiracy theorists have had a field day connecting the dots, pointing to passages that describe a beast rising from humble beginnings to unleash chaos upon the world. The eerie overlap doesn't end there. In the 1800s, as Germany was reshaping itself and old empires were fading, the stage was being set for the world-changing conflicts of the 20th century. Carr's use of Hister was probably a play on words, a wink at the Latin name for the Danube River, but the coincidence is tough to ignore. When Hitler's name began dominating headlines in the 1930s, people looked back at both Carr and Nostradamus and started weaving together a tapestry of fate. Was it just poetic coincidence, or did history echo in the strangest corners of literature? The power of a name is no joke. Hitler's rise was fueled not only by his ambition, but also by his ability to bend myth and narrative to his will. He drew on old symbols and tapped into the collective imagination of a fractured continent. If you dig into the details, you'll find that the most dangerous ideas are often the ones that have been quietly fermenting for decades or centuries before they explode. So, next time you stumble across a name or phrase that feels oddly familiar, take a second look. You never know when history is trying to warn you. Number 2. Simpsons Did It First. When The Simpsons debuted in 1989, nobody expected it to become a prophetic powerhouse. But over the decades, the show has churned out hundreds of episodes and dozens of predictions that came uncomfortably true. Remember the episode where Homer designs a car with a built-in bubble dome, a bizarre horn, and an engine in the back? Fast forward a few years, and similar features pop up in real concept cars. In 1995, Lisa video calls her mom on a device that looks suspiciously like a modern smartphone. Years later, FaceTime and Skype make it a reality. It doesn't stop at tech. The Simpsons predicted everything from the Disney-Fox merger to smartwatches, autocorrect fails, and even the exact outcome of the Super Bowl. The most jaw-dropping moment came in 2000 when an episode imagined Donald Trump as a future president 15 years before it happened. How did they do it? Maybe it's just the law of large numbers. Make enough wild guesses, and eventually some will land. Or maybe the writers are just exceptionally good at reading the winds of culture, tech, and politics. But there's something more fun at play here too. The Simpsons writers have always approached the world with a blend of cynicism and optimism, poking fun at our obsessions and our hopes. Their secret sauce? They amplify the most ridiculous trends just enough that they eventually catch up with reality. So, the next time you binge old episodes, keep your eyes open, you might spot tomorrow's headlines in the background. Number 1. The war that was named in advance. Sometimes, the scariest predictions aren't about fate, they're about pattern recognition. In the aftermath of World War I, many hoped the world had seen its last great conflict. But on September 21,920, a small article appeared in the New York Times with the headline, World War II. The piece, penned by Hungarian journalist Milos Biro, described a future global conflict that would dwarf the horrors of the past. At the time, it sounded like alarmist nonsense, but less than 2 decades later, the world would plunge into another devastating war, and Biro's headline would become chillingly literal. The phrase World War II caught on, and now we can't imagine referring to it any other way. It's a testament to the power of naming and of seeing the storm clouds on the horizon before anyone else does. So, if you ever notice history repeating itself, pay attention. You might just be witnessing tomorrow's headlines before they're written. If you made it this far, you know history is weirder and sometimes scarier than any movie script. If you're into strange true stories, subscribe for more. We've got deep dives and quick hooks coming every week. And honestly, next time someone makes a wild prediction, don't just roll your eyes. Jot it down. You never know which prophecy might end up in the history books. Until next time, stay curious and keep your eyes on the patterns. Sometimes they really are trying to tell us something.